Hello, and welcome to Right to Be Wrong, the show that revives the art of conversation, accommodating varied views on sports, culture, politics, world events, and every topic under the sun. After all, you have a right to be wrong. Here are your hosts, Dave and Tony.
Well, Tone, once again, another episode. I'm still dying. Will you resuscitate me if I fall on the floor?
That's a hard no from me, Dave.
But Tone, I love you.
There's nothing in the workplace health and safety policies of right to be wrong that would
Necessitate?
That's right, necessitate me providing any type of health support to you.
Do we have a first aid officer?
You've got the right to die, Dave.
I do have the right to die.
And the eulogy, the googly
Googly.
at your funeral is going to be immense.
Are you a good Googleizer?
Yes.
You better do it good. The Mauritian Queen will hear some amazing things about me because she's never seen them.
It's going to be a 12-part interactive speech.
With interpretive dance?
Yes, and I'll be playing all of Will Ferrell's characters as part of the
I
googly.
love it. This is the best. I'm going to hold you to this. You better do it when I actually really die now, or I'm going to come back and haunt you.
What are we informing, debating, what are you informing, debating, educating me on this week, Dave?
Oh, no, but maybe we should rename the podcast. It's all about Dave.
Oh, it's always all about Dave.
Well, I think we're going to discuss energy security as national security. Turn.
I like it. Dave. What's your opening salvo?
My opening salvo is that the West is starting to deindustrialize itself on a green dream that is starting to risk its national security. And I think it's time that we start to have an honest conversation about energy security is national security via a number of things. Obviously, it's security in terms of a strong economy.
Yep.
But in a digitized world where we've been over-reliant upon Chinese technology and Chinese goods, and there's allegations of spyware and all sorts of stuff in some of the solar panels and some of the equipment that's been placed in the US, you have to ask yourself, is it wise to rely on a bad state actor to be in control of a digitized Western economy?
But to your point, Dave, that could already be happening.
Well,
like,
this is the trouble, I think.
Like we've discussed this before, Dave, around our supply chains, our lack of resilience in our supply chains, our heavy reliance, especially in Australia's case, our heavy reliance on Chinese imports, and 70% of whatever it is, 60% of our exports go to China, whatever it might be, right? It's disproportionate. So we've actually let ourselves down this path. Why? And this is where I want to have a discussion around, this is a bit chicken and egg, Dave. What's the fundamental thing that's going to drive our ability to be secure as a nation?
Well, for me, it's very much energy policy, because if we're self-sufficient, we have industry that we can manufacture our own goods. So A, the things we need for a functioning economy, but B, things we need for on a national security level, like shipbuilding capability, missile building capability. So in other words, being able to manufacture our own steel and things like that.
But they surely the horse is bolted here. Like our ability to, even if we had the most robust energy policy that was Australia first, surely there are other input costs in terms of manufacturing that would prohibit us from being able to, manufacture competitively priced goods to avoid us relying on overseas products.
Well, Tony, I like to see that you're putting Australia first. Make Australia great again. It has the horse bolted, yes, but I would suggest it's not the only horse that we have. So I would say that we certainly can drive. Well, to start with, we need an East Coast gas reserve. That would be the first thing. So we stop exporting all our gas and paying through the nose for it being sent back to us. There is a West Coast gas reserve, but they're two separate markets because there's no pipeline that links them. But it's beyond that. It could be whether you're an advocate of nuclear, you want to go down the uranium path, whether it's gas, whether it's coal. But the point is, we shouldn't even be worried about the price of our power bills, because we should be the Saudi Arabia of the world when it comes to all things energy bar oil. So I think we should have a policy that encourages, well, you can afford to manufacture, and we should have a policy that's also linked to our AI and automation at the same time. So within that, what I mean is instead of just saying, okay, we're going to have cheap energy and we want to manufacture things again onshore, we know that the labor arbitrage is what drove it offshore. So we need to look at it and say, what are the things that we can do with automation, that it's only those large energy costs that are destroying those Australian manufacturing opportunities. Because automation and AI is going to change a lot of things, and that doesn't mean I'm not looking at this from the point of view of energy security being job security. So it's not something where I say, oh, let's grow Australian jobs by X, even though there would be. This is more around, instead of driving business offshore, instead of making things ineffective, cost ineffective because energy is so high, let's turn around and fix all those things so people don't worry about their power bills because it's negligent. Going to the supermarket, is significantly cheaper because they don't have ridiculous overheads. We can have onshore manufacturing that can underpin a development of a modern defense force. And then on top of that, let's look at things like our data centers. So our data centers use a lot of energy. And let's say, well, okay, let's be a place in this part of the world where we'll have a lot of data centers, again, because we can afford to have them. We can afford to have them cooled as far as the water because we can pump it in from the ocean and things like that. We've got a desalination plant that we never used. So it's part of an entire overarching, I would nearly say, foundational aspect of a nation-building approach to where we're going to go.
Being energy security.
Because
if I could sprinkle some magic dust over the Australian economy, and I could make energy prices drop 40%, all right, the structure of some of our oligopolies, basically, 2 or 3 big players in certain areas, they would kindly pass that saving back on through lower prices, wouldn't they?
Of course they would.
Yeah.
Well, it's like anything, right? They would, but you wouldn't get it all. Because what would happen is if they could save each consumer $50 a week, at the retail end, they would pass on 20. But at the end of the day, the reality is, if a reduction's a reduction, right? If business can increase margin but reduce cost to the consumer, that's not necessarily a bad thing. But as part of that energy, what I'd like to think is that part of that energy policy means that you would reduce barriers to entry for other players anyway.
Yeah.
So you'd like to think it'd create more competition in the market across most industries. So
okay, so I want to get a bit deeper on this economic security. So economic security for me is around jobs, people being employed, the right jobs at the right level to make sure that people can have a standard of living that we all feel comfortable about. And then when people are employed and the economy is being managed well, businesses can invest. There's growth opportunities. There's the ability for people to automate, innovate, bring new competitors in, or actually shuffle some non-competitive competitors out. Some non-competitive participants out, shovel them out. Fantastic. But I think the ability for people to work, pay taxes, that fuels the government coffers, and then the choices that the government makes around national security, around infrastructure, military infrastructure. I think those decisions become critical in terms of setting up our national security. But you're saying at the source, if we've got poor energy policy, we're basically making ourselves uncompetitive, and we're actually limiting our ability for the economy to grow, to employ people, to drive the funding for government via tax collections, to end up to invest in national security.
Correct. Exactly. And you've only got to look at like Germany, right? That sort of the Greta Thunberg acolytes that really went down the green energy path. And I know people have been at dinners or sat next to like the German energy minister that, is openly saying to them, come and set up your LNG plants and ports. We'll approve them straight away. We made a mistake going down the whole green energy path. We tried to run before we could walk. Things aren't cost effective. So that should be a lesson for Australia to look at that and say, well, what do we take out of that? And what I mean by that doesn't necessarily mean a reversion to, burning coal and just polluting everything. We can revivify our coal-fired power stations with better technologies. We can look at nuclear where it's useful. We can still have, wind, battery, like where they work and they're cost effective. I'm not saying just throw it all out. So an energy mix is probably where the conversation is. But Australia, with what we have, our energy resources and what we have, we should be driving so much business and have so much more money in people's pockets because it's not even thought of as a cost, that where the taxation comes through is, let's for a figure say the average house is spending $100 a week right now on electricity. And I'd say it's pretty close to the money. Even if that was down to $20 a week, what are you going to do with the other 80? You're going to spend it, right? So it drives more haircuts. It drives more coffees. It replaces the car a year earlier, however people choose to use it. But it also drives the ability to set up a business, because I remember having a conversation with someone years ago that was at Woolworths, and he told me at that point in time that 30% of all Woolworths costs were energy costs. So you think about how much money can be, or how much activity would be unleashed by companies coming and setting up in Australia, they say, because our manufacturing costs are so small in terms of the energy aspect. And because you're producing more goods and services, that's when the government can make the money out of the goods and services that are being produced, and that's where your taxation comes. Our policy being wrong at the moment is stifling anything from even happening, let alone, and this is before we even talk about what are the risks if you completely digitize an economy. So, for example, let's use a very unlikely outcome, but let's go with EVs, right? Let's turn around and say that BYD becomes 50% of the market in Australia, and all 50% of cars on the road are BYDs, and you find out that we have a set to with China, and they can just order BYD through the software to shut off everything. Your car's just sitting there as a giant paperweight. So it's even that sort of stuff. We don't know where the risks are and what they've supplied to us. We're assuming that we've bought all these solar panels, or you're buying these electric vehicles, or whatever technology that you're using out of China, and you're assuming that wasn't built like a digital Trojan horse. And the US are finding out recently that they've made some mistakes with that. Because if there's one thing that, if you were the Chinese who like to play the long game, if there's one way in which you really could control a world, you'd be just get the whole world digitized, addicted to your cheap digital products, electric products, and you would, 50 years later, you'd say, right, we control all the rare earths and minerals. We have the software that's inbuilt. This is what you'll do. We'll shut you down. Because how quickly would it be in that scenario if all those cars were just sitting on the road? How quickly, if everyone found out that the Chinese could just keep flicking switches and no one could go anywhere, would we be quickly kowtowing to whatever demand that they were placed on us? And you've only got to look at Portugal and Spain a couple of months back about what happened with their significant power outage. Nothing was going anywhere. You couldn't even tap your card to buy yourself a bottle of water. So, by energy security, I think it's very important that it's not all, A, you haven't offshored everything, and B, what you have, you don't have all these Trojan horses hidden in your system.
But even, Dave, you think about digitization, the digital age, that requires new grids, new infrastructure, more reliance on those grids and infrastructure in order for us to connect, produce, do whatever we do. That just becomes a bigger target, doesn't it, for cybersecurity? And
well, it does, but this is why I think you always need analog backup. So this is why I'm not a big fan of, for example, is a cashless society. I think it was the Swedes, for example, that were wanting to race to be the first ever cashless society, and then someone said, "What happens if the Russians end up, attacking our grid?" And then they realized, oh, actually, yes, because I know this was more in a less digital world, but one of the first things that actually happened post 9/11 was there were thousands of trucks sent out to fill up ATMs. So you still want that ability that, okay, we all go tap, tap, tap. I do as well. But we want to know that in a worst case scenario, we have some access to cash to buy the water, to buy the bread, to whatever. This is one of the issues that Coles and Woolworths have, right? If they have a system goes down, everyone just leaves their trolleys and walks out and can't even buy anything. So I don't want to stop the digitization. It's not like the Amish. Oh, it's a fine bar in English. Yeah, let's all go back to horse and cart. But we're putting the cart before the horse in that we assume that there's going to be no risk in this digital world, and therefore we don't have any backup.
So over the last 30 years, the pace of acceleration in terms of globalization has increased, yeah?
Definitely.
There's a world economy now, right? More so than ever, right? We rely on different parts of the world to deliver some pretty basic products for us in order for us to function. So therefore, because we're so interconnected, doesn't any type of crisis in one region quickly spread to another?
So it certainly does. But it depends on who benefits from the crisis. Right? In any crisis, someone always benefits.
What about the China virus?
Well, China would be the ones that would benefit the most, Tony.
The China crisis.
The China crisis. That sounds like a good name for a movie. Don't you think so? Have you seen that new movie, Tom? It's called The China Crisis.
So in terms of globalization, reliance on other countries to get some basic stuff done, to unwind that, Dave, again, I think the West, we've gone too far. Like we're reliant on China and even take Europe relying on Russian gas to fund it, to basically provide energy for it to do everything it needs to do.
And now you're giving a very clear example of what happens if you don't do something.
That's right.
And that's exactly what happens. So do we want that situation? Do we want to be Ukraine?
I don't think we are. That's why, to be honest, I like the fact that I know a lot of people get up in arms about renewables and the investment in renewables, and I've got no problem with it. But the fact that even the discussion and some of the decisions that have been made in the last 4 or 5 years have actually generated a diversification and an understanding of what the energy mix needs to be, and I say mix, and the transition needs to be, we're far more advanced than the clowns who used to run the joint, who and they're still banging on about it now.
But you do know what happens with batteries and windmills and stuff. You know they need, because the wind doesn't blow and the sun doesn't shine, you need a backup of.
No, but what I'm saying, Dave, that's what I'm saying,
anyway.
the mix, right? So if you listen to the policies by the current government, they're pushing renewables hard, fine, but they understand that gas still plays a part.
Correct. But one of the things with the energy mix using, say, the battery as an example, battery power. This, again, is where we curtail our own abilities because we have a lot of rare earths and criticals, but we don't want to mine them. So maybe this is part of what that energy security is, national security, is that you want to go down the path of windmill, solar panel, battery. You're going to have to accept that we start mining a lot of those critical minerals and rare earths ourselves instead of relying on China.
But I would have thought that should be a key part of any type of energy mix. If we've got things that the world is going to need, the new world is going to need, then we should harness every bit of that.
Correct. That's exactly what we should be positioning ourselves for. During this fourth industrial revolution with AI, machine learning, renewable energy, that's exactly what should be underpinning Australia's future growth. That's what we should be saying. Here's our energy security. Here's what we can do in terms of data centers, technology, energy for the world. But we're not, because we don't have anyone with this nation building idea going on. No one's clearly laying anything out on both sides of the aisle. And what we really need is someone to turn around and say, look, here's what it looks like for the next 50 years. Across that 50 years, there's going to be times it's a coalition. There's going to be times it's Labor. So therefore, let's be bipartisan and let's nut out what aspects are just good policy, and we'll play politics on everything else.
Agreed. So energy security, Dave, it's like the reliable supply, right? But what we're saying,
reliable and cheap.
Yeah. What we're saying is there's an opportunity for Australia to step up significantly because of the access to the minerals that we've got, to use that to actually step up on the economy as well.
Correct.
And I'm talking generate not only additional revenue for the government, create jobs.
New industry,
right? Where it secures us because the world's going to have to rely on us.
Correct.
We've always been the lucky country, Dave. I don't think our luck's run out.
Not yet. but we need to ensure that it doesn't run out through our own stupidity.
I know, but I think that the dirt in the ground or
Well, it started off the sheep's back, right?
That's right.
So it started with the lamb and the beef and the wool, and then it moved into the stuff in the ground with our mine, with our iron ore and coal and gas. And now it's moving into the fourth industrial revolution with data centers and AI and machine learning. We happen to have the rare earths and the criticals and things as well. So we've been very lucky in that regard, but we need to have a proper vision that sets out how we're going to maximize this and place ourselves at the forefront of this technology, in the forefront of this revolution. Within that too, we're going to have a very clear national security policy, because this is the tension we have between China and the US, because what we have is what they both want. So as part of that energy security, we need to nut out what are the new industries, what's our energy policy look like, what's our national security policy look like, what are the timelines on this, the realistic timelines on this, who do we partner with, some of the development. Excuse me, because it's the other thing too is there's, we're not going to have people in STEM that can maximize some of this stuff. So do we need a H-1B visa type of thing to attract the best brains into Australia? Offer people opportunity to come and move here on the basis of your unbelievable engineering knowledge or your AI. So this is the sort of thing we probably need as much as the way the US has done it over the years.
So let's delve a bit into how energy security plays into national security. And if we look at an example of like an energy crisis where the whole economy shuts down and you actually can't do the things you need to do, that goes directly to your economy. If you can't fund the military, and the military is like the hardware and also the spyware, the software to help defend your national border. So at the guts of everything is our ability to get a cheap supply of energy to drive industry, to drive consumer choices, to drive business investment that leads to better outcomes, better jobs, that'll fuel the economy, and then the government can decide what it wants to do from a national security perspective. There's a lot of pieces that need to line up, Dave. Right?
Correct.
Right?
But you can see
at the core of it. At the core of it is our decisions, or underpinning all of it. Is cheap, reliable energy, and then have a policy or have a program in place that says we can leverage some of the dirt that's still in the ground to help drive demand for that globally, which will help fuel our economy and so on.
Well, look at Western Europe and look at how their energy policy was just reliant upon cheap Russian gas, and how that undermined and not underpinned their national security. And now they're playing catch up. So this is a prime example for us. And this is what I mean by energy security. Energy security being national security is that long line. And it's something that Australia is we're probably more than beyond lucky. I don't think there's anywhere else. I think the only other place that sort of has what we have in terms of the rare earths and criticals to the same levels actually Greenland, which is why the
51st state in America.
51st state.
So,
well, 52nd because Canada was going to be. But you've seen Alberta and Saskatchewan, there's secessionist movements going on there, and they're sort of saying to Ottawa, we're sick of sending you money, you keep blocking these pipelines, but you keep taking our dollars. And so, yeah, I'm watching that with great interest, because if there's ever really going to be a genuine 51st state, it will come about with Alberta and Saskatchewan joining the US.
Can you give me just a quick Donnie, the first time he speaks to the Greenland Parliament? Or
well, I see there's only 80,000 of you. We have more than that in the National Guard. So you've got two choices. You give me what I want, or we just take over.
Thanks, Donnie. Now, Dave, a couple of times you mentioned
many.
I'm going to ask a question, and because you've answered this in the past, and I never saw it through this lens. No. So What
Are you saying you don't listen to
what
me?
what is economics about, Dave?
Well,
And you've answered this before. I know
people used to
exactly.
say the basis of economics was supply and demand, and that's what I used to respond. And then I read a really good piece by someone that said, no, the basis of economics is energy. And I thought about that, and I thought, yeah, actually, it's right. Because what was the Industrial Revolution? What took the world from subsistence farming, agrarian economies to industrialized world was the ability to access cheap energy at scale, reliably. And that's what created the factories that would start mass producing all the all the items we have. I think I'm genuinely really am going to die in this episode, no?
Really?
Nah, not really. I just keep getting a tickle. I just keep wanting to cough. And it's annoying, but I'm here. I'm a trooper. You set the standard. You set the standard early on when you were nearly dead. You turned up, you recorded. So I'm like,
So
let's go with it.
if we just kind of move on to national security, we know it needs to get funded, but that underpins a lot of this, right? So national security, in a simple sense, is all about tanks, people, protecting your borders, but it's a bit more than that. It's actually protecting your supply chains, protecting
Correct.
your infrastructure, because you know that any and ways to protect that clearly, but any impact on that infrastructure, because it's not secured properly, directly goes to economic outcomes, right? Directly goes to energy outcomes. So, and that's why I keep on going, David. This is really chicken and egg. But
Yeah.
now the question:
Wars are not won because you kill soldiers. Wars are won because you kill supply chain. It's logistics that wins wars. And now, that's not me saying a combat soldier is not amazing. The sacrifice they make is not amazing, but they'll tell you themselves that if the ammunition is not coming, if the food is not coming, they can't do what they do. So logistics is really what happens. So you don't go to combat with the aim of literally just destroying all the soldiers. You try and destroy the ammunitions demo, ammunitions dump. You try and destroy the fuel supplies. You try and take over areas of industrial capacity from the enemy. And so if you look at the history of war, that's really what happens. And so it's important that not only at the same time as we make sure we have this ability in the new world to actually defend ourselves as much as we can, but it is very much about that, the level of security of that infrastructure.
So you see it play out in wars, even in Russia and Ukraine now, correct?
100%.
Where they'll target energy infrastructure, they'll target pipelines.
Correct.
So if Vlad is blowing up a whole lot of pipelines and the people in Ukraine are struggling to turn lights on, get any heat, it creates political instability as well.
Exactly.
And then that drives outcomes in terms of protests. So you see that play out quite a lot. You'll see, I think to a lesser extent, you've probably seen it in the Middle East, but you'll always see energy infrastructure targeted.
Well, what do you think the Houthis actually do when they're targeting the ships? Right. The thing that's what is supply chain.
Yep.
That's where the damage is.
So what about, Dave? There's a bit of a feedback loop here, right? Energy shock drives up costs, right? Hurts the economy, less money to spend on defense, weakens national security.
Correct.
Yeah, fair call. What about the flip side? Strong economy. If you've got a strong economy, you can invest in different energy sources. You can invest to get the optimal mix, whatever that might be, and that's a separate discussion, which reduces energy vulnerability because you're not actually linked to one source of energy to drive your outcomes, and that strengthens national resilience, which drives national security.
Correct. The thing that the thing that the Americans won the Second World War on, and I say that very subjectively. I'm not saying they won it on their own. The Soviets had a massive role in that. The Brits certainly had a massive role. But Admiral Yamamoto himself, when the Japanese were discussing the attack on Pearl Harbor, so the reason for the attack on Pearl Harbor was the concept was that the Japanese didn't believe they could win a war against the US. Yamamoto said, "You'll awaken a sleeping giant," because he'd studied there, he'd seen their industrial capacity not only what they were running with, but what they had the capabilities to ramp up. And they came up with a plan that they would attack the Pacific base in Pearl Harbor with the concept of two things. One is that obviously then the fleet couldn't head west and cut off the Japanese as they went south to take over rubber plantations and the oil and stuff in Southeast Asia. And the other was they were hoping to do such damage that the US public wouldn't have an appetite to fight a war. And Yamamoto had actually said that for the first 6 months, we will run rampant. But if the war's still going within 12 months, we'll be in trouble. We'll be lost. And that's exactly what played out. So, this is, one of the things they actually got wrong in the attack in Pearl Harbor is they didn't hit the dry docks and they didn't hit the fuel dumps. So the ships that weren't sunk were back in operation within 6 or 9 months. Now, mind you, had they have even hit them in Pearl Harbor again, the US would probably just make them elsewhere. But that industrial capacity is what made the US, that ability to ramp up production, that ability, that the cheap energy that they had in the domestic market at home that could underpin all the factories and the building of new planes and ships and tanks. Then on top of that became, the manpower they had, but it literally is that ability. And if they didn't have the energy, so if they didn't have the oil that they already had in the mainland, if they were reliant upon from somewhere else, it'd be a very different thing. And that was the problem Hitler had. And if you look at some of his moves, particularly Operation Barbarossa, which is the attack on the Soviet Union, you see them move and swing to the Caucasus to take over the oil fields and things like that. So all these things really, not only in everyday life, but if and when war kicks off, that energy security is absolutely paramount.
So, Dave, as we transition, and I'll come back to this optimal energy mix and how Australia really is well placed, right? We can actually diversify from oil and gas, right? Still going to be a part of it. We can diversify so there's less reliance. And as a separate comment, the amount of oil reserves that we actually keep on hand here is shockingly low. It's embarrassing.
Well, we don't even refine our own stuff. We used to refine it here in Sydney at
Burnell.
Yeah. Well, and Grand Avenue, Camellia.
Yeah.
There
actually,
Shell,
Rose Hill.
Shell,
Yeah.
We don't do that. So that's something else. Yeah. If things kicked off, people don't realize at the moment, if things kicked off with China, like seriously with China, we wouldn't last too long.
Like, I'm being serious, Dave. I think the reserves are like less than a month. It's not much at all, right? Yeah. So we've got an opportunity to diversify our mix, make sure we're not as reliant on oil and gas. But then as we transition to renewables, and the world is transitioning to renewables, we open up other reliance risks in terms of who's controlling most of the minerals at the moment.
China, 70% of the rare earths and minerals are controlled by China. China literally has the supply chain and all that stuff covered.
And then where are the rare minerals, where are they found, Dave?
Well, China actually has a lot themselves in China, but there's a lot in Africa, and that's part of that their foray into Africa over the years with the predatory lending and whatnot. So for us, and this is probably being serious about what can we do with relationship with the US while DJT is in charge, it's probably opening up discussions around supply chain of rare earths.
Between ourselves and the US.
What we have.
Because like you said 70% is controlled by China.
Yeah.
Like what's our percentage? Like what do we have? 2% of the world's rare earth minerals?
No, I think it's I could be wrong on my numbers here, but something like 40 or 50%.
Okay.
Yeah, it's like really high. It's just that we don't want to dig. We have an issue in this country around mining.
Yep.
Yeah, because we just want to, believe that, again, the windmill and the unicorn will provide everything, so we don't want to dig. But the reality is that, and this is a harsh reality of the energy transition. If you're of the view that you're supporting the energy transition because you're anti-mining, all you're doing is swapping out one lot of mining for another.
Yep.
In fact, some of the mining of the stuff like cobalt and whatnot and lithium is some of the worst. It uses more water and things like that than any other type of mining. It's what you don't want, to be honest. So what you're doing is you're sort of hypothetically speaking, on the assumption that CO2 emissions are the worst evil thing in the world, you're swapping out that for a whole bunch of other bigger, worse mining issues. So water usage, for example.
Yeah. Okay. What about Dave? If I see national security as the umbrella, right? So without national security, you can't control your borders. There's no stability in terms of your key infrastructure. There's risks of attack. If you actually can't get that right, it doesn't matter how cheap your energy is. It don't mean shit. You've got nothing.
Correct.
Right. So then this is the chicken and egg thing. Whereas the flip side would be energy is the basis of giving you the financial capacity and the ability as a society via a government to go and invest in the things that are going to provide that security.
Correct. That's exactly right. You need to you need to have the situation where what you're doing is you're making it affordable and incentivized to have a great economy that's diversified in its industry, and then you're prepared to commit a good amount of your GDP into your R&D for your defense.
So I've just
and the one thing I would say too here is when we talk about that, if we go back 40 or 50 years, and you talk about a percentage of GDP as a spend for your military capabilities. For example, we used to say, like, Australia had an aircraft carrier, but we couldn't afford to keep them. It was just too expensive for the size of our economy. But today's world with asymmetric warfare, we only need drones and a few different missiles and things like that. So, it doesn't mean that you'll get away with not spending. It just means that there are areas that you can spend on that you don't necessarily have to go with the big aircraft carrier, the intercontinental ballistic missiles. But at the moment, we're not looking at any of that sort of stuff.
I think we need to, right?
Or we're not looking at it enough.
Because if you see how effective Ukraine and now Russia have been in terms of drones and the impact that they can have, and then you look at the cost of our current commitment that's now under review to AUKUS and the time that's going to take, right? And the money that's going to cost, it doesn't add up, does it?
No, not at all. In fact, I can see, like, Australia does need submarines. They're quite useful to have, not be able to see what's around our coastline. It's helpful. But I think that we haven't exactly allocated the funding and the resources the right way. And it's not my area of expertise, but I certainly know that even the US has been looking at the cost of using $1 million missiles to shoot down hundreds of dollars of drones that the Houthis use.
Yeah.
So it is one thing that has happened is asymmetric warfare has really changed. And in fact, the Ukrainian attack on Russia about a month back, where it looks like they snuck their drones into Russia and then hit their planes,
like in some truck, right, or a couple of trucks. Yeah.
Now, from a Western perspective, you could be like, "Oh, brilliant, well done, got the Russian planes." But in truth, everyone should be in panic mode, because that means right now we don't know whether terrorists, whether state actors, whether the Chinese have got thousands of these things parked anywhere, ready to go. They're out near the RAF base. They're, where are they? Yeah. Because it means it's that easy now to hide things. And if a drone's only going to go, 20 kilometers now, so it's quite concerning, to be honest.
Yeah. So Dave, I think we landed on energy is the core.
Energy is the foundations.
Like without energy, national security.
Well, how far do your tanks go without your petrol?
National security is almost theory.
And also, how far do your drones go if you can't replace the batteries?
Yeah, I get it. What about Dave? So we spoke earlier about Russia and how it used its energy resources as leverage over Europe. In a worst case scenario, right? What could that have ended up in? Like, if Europe and Vlad started punching on seriously, and Vlad closes the pipes, how significant is that?
It'd be incredibly significant.
Does Europe go into darkness?
Not quite, but not far off. It certainly would have to scramble to try and find alternatives, and then of course that would cause one of the reasons why they're careful about the sanctions on Russia with the price setting of price caps and what they can sell for rather than just say you can't sell and they squeeze it down is, can you imagine just sort of taking 30%, 40% of energy out of the world's economy? Because at the end of the day, as much as, say, using the West and Russia as a very loose delineation, countries like Pakistan, India, they don't care what the West is doing. If they can get oil at $30 a barrel from the Russians, they're taking it. In fact, to them, they think we're idiots because we'll continue to accept $110, $120 a barrel out of our own hubris. So, and particularly being that, we've been down this path before where we spoke about NATO's eastward expansion, and it wasn't this pure, the bear just woke up one day and decided it was going to, cross over Ukraine and start punching on. So at the end of the day, there are countries in the world that just take the opportunity and they don't really care whether we're winning, whether Russia's winning. What they see is $30 a barrel oil that we're paying 3 times the price. So,
because it does open up a discussion, Dave, around, here comes another tangent for Tony and Dave. You look at Europe.
What would an episode be without a tangent?
No, we don't call it a tangent. What do we call it?
It's a weave, Tony.
It's a weave, Tony.
It's a weave. We're weaving.
Can we pivot?
Of course we can.
Okay.
Only if we can circle back.
Yeah, absolutely. So with if I look at the Russia issue and the leverage they had over Europe, and let's just focus on Europe for a second. So Russia's got them by the short and curlies from an energy perspective, right? Militarily, they'll they'll significantly rely on some support from Washington to provide, to underpin, like, the support that they would need in some type of escalated environment. What the hell have the Europeans been doing, bro?
Yeah, well, this is, see, now you're making Trump's argument, and this is another thing why I'm on the
done.
Trump train.
I'm done with this podcast.
So, well, this is another, like, there's a number of reasons. I don't, to use the saying, I can separate the art from the artist, right? I'm not worried about what Trump does. I just look at the policies, what he ran on, what he believes in, what he's enacted, and I want that in Australia. When I hear him make America great again, America first, I want to hear an Australian politician saying, make Australia great again, Jacinta. I'm up for that. It should be Australia first. That doesn't mean I want Australia to be isolationist and not be a good global citizen, but it's not up to us to go around the world paying for everyone else, fixing everyone else's problems. It's something that when you've got your own house in order and then you have the luxury to spend some of the leftover dollars or some of the resources to help others, sure. But in all honesty, one thing that DJT's been saying that's true, people have been taking advantage of the US for a very long time. At the end of the day, if you want the national security of the US, if you want the American market, why are you reliant upon the US for their military to keep Western Europe safe from Eastern?
I know, but like the other side of that coin, Dave, is the insatiable desire for the US to exert and continue to expand its sphere of influence across the globe, right?
Well, that's the one thing. What I would say is that's why it was accepted up until now.
Yeah,
right. The US were like, we're happy to wear these costs. We're happy to do that because we want our fingers in all these pies. But when you've got to the point where the average US citizen has had enough of endless wars, and they have, even though most of them, can't point to where they are on the map, that's where it's different. That's where it's like, because there's a difference between isolationist and non-interventionist. And I think that Trump is more in the non-intervention camp, not necessarily looking to be isolationist, because he does like a deal. Yeah. He likes a dollar. And if you're isolationist, you don't deal with anyone. But if you're non-interventionist, and this is why Mohammed bin Salman gave him the standing ovation when he went to Saudi, because if people really listen to Trump's speech, whether you hate him, whether you love him, if you actually listen, he said, for too long, people have been going around the world telling you how to live, how to run your affairs. I'm not interested. That time is over. I'm interested in making deals. Boom. That's exactly what it should be.
I know. Mind you, he's struggling on a couple of promises he made around solving some wars, but that's another episode. You mentioned Saudi Arabia, Dave. Interestingly, would you suggest that Saudi Arabia, from an energy perspective, is 100% secure? Or close to?
Yeah,
Okay.
pretty close to, because aside from the oil, they've got a lot of gas. And actually, having worked at Aramco, I can actually tell you that they're also the largest chemical company in the world, and they invest heavily in renewable technologies. We've got I'm going to do a whole episode on inside Aramco, because there'd be some really interesting stuff about the support or lack thereof that goes on for some of their students. But to link it to Mohammed bin Salman's 2030 vision, and I'll say straight here, to me, one of the best statesmen in the world is Mohammed bin Salman. I see a lot of similarities in what he's trying to do in Saudi and what Lee Kuan Yew did at Singapore. But one of the foundational aspects of his 2030 vision is the fact that energy security underpins everything they do. They've got the money to invest in what he does. And for those that are still caught up in what you think Saudi was, I'll give you a few examples. The first thing is they have massive entertainment seasons, they call them. So what I mean by that is the best artists in the world, musicians and other forms of art, they will have like a Riyadh season or a Jeddah season or a mental block on the other place. But anyway, the point being, for that month, all the big artists are there. The concerts are on. The festivals are on. The events are on. So it'd be like in Sydney for November.
A bit of sport washing, Dave?
Well, the sport's the other thing they're doing as well. But that part of it's just in terms of the music and the festivals and food. And then on top of that, they've got the sport. So they obviously have a Formula One race. They've bought big name soccer players, their venues. They've got the Live Golf. And I'll defend it. I'll defend it because people say it's sport washing. I'll defend it to this point. And don't get me wrong, I've got a lot of criticisms. I worked under some people that I wouldn't leave in charge of a Bunnings barbecue. And as I said, we'll go into that in my whole Insider Aramco episode. But they're not doing that to sports wash. Like at the end of the day, we say, we want them to change. Well, okay, they're changing. And now you're complaining. So what is it? What would be the acceptable thing to happen, right? So when Formula One started to go into Saudi Arabia, one of the things that Sebastian Vettel, the Formula One world champion, started was to encourage women into motorsport.
Yep.
Now, at that time, women couldn't drive. So what he wanted, I can't remember, it was like 20, 30 girls that they were going to go to this 2-3 day go-karting event. And Sebastian Vettel, 4-time world champion, was going to give you tips on how to drive, how to race, get them into it. Now, the first year or so, they barely got the numbers because you need father's permission, things like that. The one just gone this year, for the 30 people, they had 2,000 applications for 30 positions. So things are changing, but how fast do you expect things to change? And even when they do, you forget. So no one's giving kudos to say, well, Saudi has an F1 race. Saudi's now got the soccer. Women now drive. Women are going out of kingdom and studying. They've got all the big artists and the musicians go there. No one's giving any kudos for that. Everyone's still talking about what it was 30 or 40 years ago. So one of the things is that Mohammed bin Salman, the crown prince, the future king, the reason he can do those things is because Aramco is something like 75, 80% of Saudi GDP. The money made out of that company through the oil and gas and petrochemicals and everything else underpins his ability to change society through funding these different things. And then the other thing they do is they are funding their military, but they don't need to worry about that because the US will step in if need be. But it does show you what happens when you've got a nation that maximizes its factor endowments in such a way that allows you to he's nation building. That's what he's doing, he's nation building.
Yeah, but even with energy security almost guaranteed, they've still got national security threats.
They do, but they don't have they've got national security threats for a different level. The one thing that he doesn't have to worry about at this point would be that the economy that he's creating and the vision that he has, that it can't be done because they don't have the energy and affordability to invest and to do it. And the other thing, as I said, is that they have the US security. So for them, they're a bit unique. That when I say energy security is national security. For us, we relied on the US, but we've got a situation at the moment where our current government's probably not that keen on having a close relationship with the US for our national security. Otherwise, we'd be in the same boat. We should be just like Saudi.
So, Dave, is there a country out there that isn't blessed with its own ability to fully provide all the energy that it needs?
Lots.
Right? And
Japan.
you're saying that from a military perspective and an economic perspective, they're undermined.
Yeah, very much so. Very much. That's why they're reliant upon their alliances, and that's exactly why you start to rely on your alliances. Well, let's look at.
So it can be done because Japan, over a long period of time, 70 years, they've obviously built their alliances to a point where.
Japan's alliance. There's still a U.S. naval base in Okinawa.
Yeah,
the occupation's still there. People don't realize that the U.S. military occupation of Japan post Second World War hasn't ended. But let's use Greenland as an example.
Go on.
Well, who's Greenland reliant upon?
No one.
Denmark.
Really? Oh, okay.
Like, you know what I mean? They're like, even though, don't get from the best of my knowledge, they don't want a colonial power in Denmark, but Denmark is their protector. Who's Denmark protecting? Literally, the US could take that in a heartbeat, and no one's doing anything. And if you really want to know, Russia is making all sorts of threats of a red line of if the US takes Greenland, what could happen? Because they know, for them, the problem is if the US is in control and in Greenland, what they're worried about is that North Passage through the Arctic. And so it's a lot more strategic than what people realize and always has been.
Yeah, but like Vlad's got enough on his hands. Like if the US really wanted to take it, they'd take it now.
Well, you still don't want to be just taking sovereign states, even though you might want it, but it's still not a good look. And any advisor to DJT would be making that clear anyway. But if I was Greenland in the current world, I'd know the Danes can't protect me. I know the Russians are eyeing me off because, again, what would stop the Russian invasion? Now, I know the threat, the US would go in, but you need someone. So better the devil you know.
So where do we land, Dave? So the three we spoke about: economic security, national security, energy security, all interrelated. Correct.
100%.
But at the core of it, it's energy security.
Yep.
That's going to drive the outcomes.
The foundation.
The foundational piece that will drive the economy, make you competitive, get people employed, get businesses to invest, and then that'll drive
the mass production of goods.
And then that'll drive, obviously, the government coffers for them to make decisions around national security.
Because literally, that's what the Industrial Revolution is about.
But Dave,
It's about energy,
but
mass affordability of energy.
So in Australia, like we're not talking little problems here.
No, we have a big Australia policy without a big Australia plan. All we have is just the growth, the numbers. This is how many more people. We have nothing. We have no leader that's come out and said, here's the number, here's why, here's the industry that we will transition to, here's the industries we will strengthen, here's the amount of people we need in trades, here's the amount we'll need in universities, here's the type of course we'll need in universities. No, there's nothing. We just have an arbitrary number of 40 million and nothing else behind it.
Yeah, because we're more worried about, as we've spoken on another podcast, we're more worried about prosecuting culture wars.
Yeah, it's about time everyone grows up and actually stops worrying about your gender pronouns and some of this other dribble and actually be and one thing is be really honest. If you're that way inclined, if you suffer gender dysphoria, or if you're in that camp, be really honest with yourself. Are you really unsafe? And don't go, I feel unsafe. Words are unsafe. Words are no. Grow up and be honest about where you live. Are you really unsafe in Australia? Is that your biggest issue? Because if the Chinese took over, you'd be unsafe. If others, you'd be unsafe. Or do you want to be able to afford to pay your bills, pay your rent? Would you like to be able to buy a house, with your lover, gay, lesbian, whatever? Because for me, what I want, no matter who you are, I want you to have the same as me. So if you're trans and you think you're a woman where you got a penis, I have no issue with that. But I still want you to have affordable electricity. I still want you to have affordable housing. I still want you to have universal health care. And that's what people get wrong. And these things are the things that are going to support all of us, no matter your age, no matter your sexuality, no matter your eye shape. These are the things we need to fix, because we all know as soon as you get out and you jump into your car, you're catching public transport, you're paying your bills, everyone in this country, and it's a bit of a through line because the Canadians have the same issue, the UK has the same issue, the US. It's about time all of us start to focus on what makes an economy run, what's the changing world we're facing, because with AI and machine learning, it's huge, and what's happening geopolitically in terms of the threat of wars, more wars breaking out and or escalating into a third global conflict.
So in summarising, Dave, I think we both agree, prioritise energy security.
Definitely.
Underpins the economy. That'll drive national security. But as an overarching comment, the size of the problem is massive, and I still don't think there's real understanding of the size of that problem, specifically in Australia. And the things that we need to do and the order in which we need to do them to make sure that we've got the capacity to invest in the areas we need to invest in. I just don't think it's there. And I don't think people see it as a problem, Dave. Maybe it's just maybe you and I are the two old white. Oh, look, the angry man yelling at the clouds.
But look, I know I'm an angry man. But no, we've got in the pipeline I think we're looking at a 10-part series, a nation building series. I want to reach out to a few different experts in the field that can speak to their aspect. But if you don't, you think it's something that we're talking about that's not really a problem, just think a little bit more carefully about what your life looked like 10 years ago, 20 years ago, and what it looks like now. And again, this doesn't matter what part of the world you're in, unless you're sort of 20, 25, but even still, if you're that age, ask your parents, ask older friends what life was like for them when they were growing up and why they could afford a house and why energy was cheaper. Don't just point the fingers all the time and okay, boomer, and blame. Yes, there's some blame for some poor decisions. Yes, there are things that have got to change. But just yelling and screaming at people ain't going to fix anything. Start to understand the depth of the problem. Start to understand, the problems, the depth of the problems, so that then whether you're a Liberal, Labor, Tory, Green, Republican, Democrat, you can hold your representatives to account at what you need, so that you can either have a reversion to a better life that we used to have, or you get your opportunity to climb the ladder in terms of property ownership and family and all the things that underpin a healthy and happy life.
Good way to finish, Dave. I think it'd be remiss of us on this episode this week if we don't pay homage to my hero, Hulk Hogan.
The Hulk.
The Hulk's that passed away.
Actually, you know what? That's a very good point, because
he was a real American, Dave.
He was. That's what I was going to say. To me, growing up, remember, he was represented all things good in America. And don't get me wrong, even as kids, we knew that wrestling was fake. Oh, to all those people in the US, you're probably a bit, oh, wow, it's fake. But he was a patriot.
Yep.
He was funny.
Yep.
He achieved.
He was bigger
than hard yards.
Larger than life.
He was definitely larger than life. I think the Hulk was someone that really represented all things good in America. And if you wanted to personify where you should be returning to, probably not Orange Man, the Don, but I'd say Orange Hulk. Return to that type of American. He was for everyone. I think it's a loss.
So Dave, say your prayers, take your vitamins. To all the Hulkamaniacs out there, what do we always say here?
You have a right to be wrong.
Take care, Dave.
Thank you for listening to this episode, and we hope you enjoyed it. Like us on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, and TikTok. Please leave us a review on Apple Podcasts and Spotify.